the original work of Su Qing's autobiographical novel 10 Years of Marriage, Chapter 17. Surprise in the delivery room after Xingying got married. Apart from her parents-in-law and Lao Huang's mother, there was only one Sichuan in the family, and everyone felt lonely. One time, the father-in-law suddenly said, "Is Chaku 4 years old this year?" The mother-in-law replied gloomily, "No." Only Lao Huang's mother was there to reveal their thoughts and said, "Young mistress should also raise a younger brother." Yes, I glanced at Xian and lowered my head without saying anything. Xian just smiled to himself. In the spring of the 26th year of the Republic of China, Xian Zai was busy preparing for his graduation thesis. As he copied the materials, he faced me and said, "I never thought you would actually be pregnant. Your delivery date will be in July. I will have graduated at that time. It can be said to be a double blessing." I said, "You'd better not care too much. If you can't find a better job after graduation, you can't make a living by teaching. And it's not easy to ask for money from your family to support your children. This is called misfortunes never come singly. And you can't say whether you are happy or not." He said this, making him even more sad. I know my father-in-law's temper. He longs for me to raise a grandson for him as soon as possible, just as he longs for a talented person to graduate as soon as possible and help him shine the lintel of his door. But these are all dependent on luck. So how can he get it in a hurry? Finally, the summer vacation started. My father-in-law sent me 3,000 yuan and attached a long letter advising Xian to find another decent house, make some clothes, and finally told him to buy me more food and to take good care of me during the birth. Maintenance. This time it must be a child, he said, because he had already gone to tell our fortunes. After Xian took the money, he became even more anxious. He said that finding a house was the most important thing. On the one hand, it would be more dignified when guests came, and on the other hand, he could live comfortably after raising a child. But where to find it? I have a protruding belly and it is difficult to move around. Motherlin only had enough time to cook. The weather was hot and her mood was chaotic. He himself was not interested, so he had to casually find a house on the shortcut of Ayer. The house we built was actually clean. The house fee was 120 yuan, including water, electricity, and decoration. In addition, we also bought a set of living room furniture and moved in within a few days. It was so busy. Relatives and friends sent many silver shield frames, some to celebrate graduation and some to celebrate housewarming. We only smiled bitterly when we received them. Originally, our family had no worries about food and clothing, but because it seemed a shameful thing for a man to be unable to stand on his own feet, Xian was so anxious that he ran around day and night, and his face became tan and thin. Since he can't be home all the time, it's up to me and Motherland to decorate the house. We did the living room, and the upstairs was originally divided into 2 rooms. The front room was used as a bedroom, and the back room was left empty, ready for the wet nurse to live in. This living room is extremely high, with no ceiling, but an attic. It looks dark, and there is also a shrine with 2 yellow silk hanging on both sides, covered with dust, probably left by the previous owner of the house. Could it be that the previous owner used it to ward off evil spirits because the house was uneasy? That is of course unknown. Looking at this kind of shrine often makes people think of the underworld in a rural temple. Therefore, I didn't dare to go up to see it in person, and I didn't ask Motherland to clean it, so I just left it empty. At night, Xian didn't come back for a long time, and Motherland was cleaning the dishes in the kitchen downstairs. I was alone in the room reading, and a Ganwu photoelectric lamp hung from a high place. The light was so dim that I couldn't help but somewhat timid. But he didn't want to move, because the back room was also unoccupied. The pavilion was used as Lin's mother's bedroom, and the door was ajar. It was dark when he looked in. Moreover, at the head of the stairs, when he looked back, he saw 2 glass windows on the balcony, which were shining brightly, flickering like a willow, the wisp jumping. Thinking of this, my knees trembled and my nostrils were filled with air conditioning. One time, I saw Mrs. Lin rushing to catch up, looking round the room with a look of surprise, and then exited and tried to push the door of the back room. I knew something was wrong, so I timidly asked her what she was doing. She replied with a trembling voice, "No, nothing." When she said that, her expression changed, and she turned around and wanted to come down. At that time, I couldn't bear it anymore. As if there were ghosts in the shrine above trying to grab me. He grabbed the corner of her clothes and said repeatedly, "Motherlin, I'll go downstairs with you to have a look at the kitchen. I'll go downstairs with you." She looked at me with her eyes wide open, with a look of horror on her face, and we stared at her. Gu walked downstairs. Later, she told me hesitantly that just now she was wiping the table and turned around to see a man walking up the stairs. His neck was so white that it looked like he had just shaved his head. She thought her uncle was back, so she quickly followed him and poured tea. Unexpectedly, not even a shadow was seen. "Maybe it's my eyesight," she said. "Miss, don't be afraid." But I never wanted to leave her one step again, so I slept with her in the pavilion that night. When Zhang came back at midnight, he saw that the lights in the room were on, but my person was missing. He was also frightened and couldn't help but make strange noises. Cried. Motherlin and I woke him up in the pavilion. We thought he had encountered some kind of monster, so his teeth chattered and he couldn't move. Even if he wanted to agree, it was like someone had his throat strangled to silence him. I covered my face with my hands. He curled up and got under the sheets. Xian screamed but didn't agree, and felt even more strange in his heart. He opened the door of the pavilion in a panic and took a look. Only then did he realize that Motherlin and I had fainted from fright. Although he barely laughed at us, he probably couldn't help it either. I was a little timid, so I told Motherlin that night that if she was scared, she could roll up a mat and sleep in our back room. It would be more lively if we all crowded together, which of course she wanted. Until later, another guest came to my house. That is Zhou Minghua. He had just returned from Nanjing. He said that the recent news was bad, so it was better to keep him at my house for a few days. He readily agreed. I live in a pavilion, so I am more courageous. Sometimes Xian doesn't come back to eat, so I eat alone with him. After he finishes eating, I don't let him go back. We all chat and wait until Xian comes back. After a few words, they went back to bed. On the evening of August 9th, Xian came in with a panicked expression. I immediately looked up at the shrine and saw that the yellow silk seemed to be fluttering. I said, "What should I do? It's near the North Railway Station, so it's probably very dangerous." Minghua said, "Then we should move to the concession as soon as possible." Xian's face was gloomy. He hesitated for a long time and said, "I'll have to wait until you give birth." As he said this, Motherlin also came in. She said that when she went out to buy vegetables today, there were a lot of people moving things on the road. It turned out that it's really not peaceful. Everyone discussed it for half the night, but there was no result. The next day, Xian went out to look for Tang from the Lu family to discuss it, but he turned back before he was halfway and said that there were two sergeants standing guard along the road, and it was really intimidating to walk there. I was so anxious that I almost cried. Motherlin said, "People have small ideas and big ideas, and the childbirth in the belly is uncertain. We can't wait for him, so we should move to the concession first." So Xian decided to go out and look for a house. But when I came back in the evening, I said it was hard to find a house, and some of the houses were very expensive. We stood at the back door all day and saw everyone in the alley moving their belongings. We were as anxious as ants on a hot pot. When I heard him say there was no hope, I feel that my death is near. On the third day, it was already August 11th. Seeing that all 10 rooms in the alley were empty, Minghua volunteered and went to look for Xian separately. In the afternoon, he came back with his head full of annihilation and told me that in France, he has found 2 living rooms downstairs in the central district of Shifei Road in the concession. The house is very dirty and the rent is 30 yuan per month. He asked Xian if he has come back. It would be best to go with him to see and decide. I said, "Don't wait for him any longer. We'll pay 10 yuan first to confirm the details." It wasn't until evening that Xian came back and said that he had a foreign-style house for sale. It even had mahogany furniture. I didn't know where he would flee to in the future. Let's talk about buying furniture for the rooftop later. It's better to stay at Shifei Road for a while. Now I had no choice but to let him go. I hope Kong is panicked and can come back here as soon as possible. That night, we took some parcels with us, and the 3 of us took 3 rickshaws. Only Motherlin looked after the house. The road was extremely crowded, and the pedestrians and rickshaw drivers laughed. but there was no way we could squeeze in. I just shed tears when I looked at my protruding belly. Xian said it was better to ask the driver to take me back, and we left empty-handed. I persisted and finally got out of the siege after all the hard work. I slept in the new house that night. I only borrowed a mat from the landlord to sleep on the floor, and covered it with random sheets. There were so many bedbugs at night that I tossed and turned without falling asleep. Xian and Minghua went back to their hometown in Irejian Road to pack their things. They agreed to carry out groceries with Lin's mother tomorrow and pick up some simple utensils to bring with them. Kishu had to rely on luck. But by noon the next day, the three of them still hadn't arrived. I hadn't eaten a grain of rice since early in the morning, and I didn't even have water to wash my face. I just felt like something strange was going on in my stomach. At about 12:30, Xian, Minghua, Lin Ma and others finally followed the two collapsed cars. They said that a lot of belongings had been lost on the way, but we didn't care about it and just arranged everything. I helped them pass things this way and that way. And Xian said, "Don't be too busy. I'll wait for you later." I could barely bear it at first, but when I told him this, I felt a little nervous in my stomach. Got sick. None of us had lunch. We only had bowls of noodles. During dinner, Xian said it was time for 2 glasses of wine, and ordered Mother Lin to go out and buy some barbecued pork and the like. Just as she was about to enjoy herself, I frowned and went to the toilet. My stomach started to hurt until about 10:30, and I couldn't bear it any longer. I ignored Xian's fatigue and opened his eyes, which he had just dozed off, and sent me directly to Ren Hospital, with Mother Lin accompanying me, and Zhou Minghua was in charge of the house. I pinched his wrist in the car and sobbed. The current situation is so dangerous. How can we escape after giving birth? Xian said, "Let's just leave it to fate here. If we want to live together, we will die together." I was so grateful that I shed tears, but my stomach cramped even more. When you walk into the hospital gate, you must first register and complete all procedures. So Xian and Lin's mother took me to the back room, and I could only hear the screams of several mothers inside. It was unbearable to hear. Both Xian and Lin's mother drooped their necks in pity. I just felt panic in my heart, like a lamb being slaughtered. The strange nurse of the eyebrows was let in, but Xian Tong and Lin's mother were blocked outside. When I was struggling to step over the threshold, I couldn't help but look back at Xian. His face seemed to be pale and tight, and his eyes were sunken. It was obvious that he was overtired. I couldn't help looking at him sadly and waving, telling him to go back quickly. "Let's sleep for a while." He seemed to be stopping me with his eyes. He stretched out his arms, as if he wanted to move forward, but knowing that it was actually impossible, he put them down calmly. The nurse changed my clothes, asked me to relieve myself, and then led me to the delivery room. There are 2 beds placed side by side in the room, separated by a cloth in the middle. On the bed outside, lying as if sleeping, a woman with disheveled hair and a pale face stood upright, which was scary. My stomach was cramping while she urged her to walk in. The bed was very high, and I had to stand on a small stool to get up. I couldn't get up for a while, so I gave the nurse with thick eyebrows a lift, and finally I was able to get up. I climbed up, but even my little face flashed from the waist down. The pain made me almost faint. Later, another nurse and doctor came and managed to disinfect me for some reason. They told me to lie down on my back alone and not move around. They said it was still early after birth, and it might not be until tomorrow morning. I was so anxious that I just wanted to cry. I wanted to die, but just thinking about it couldn't alleviate the pain much. All the doctors and nurses in the delivery room had left. I peeked through the cracks in the street at the woman in the next bed. I saw that her mouth was slightly open and her eyes were half open and half closed, like a zombie. I was scared and in pain, and no one paid attention to me after struggling for half an hour. Suddenly there was a sharp pain, and I couldn't help crying and shouting. It looked like the child was about to come out. After shouting for a while, I saw a nurse running in a panic. I looked down and said, "Oh, we're coming down soon." As he said this, he covered my lower body with his hands and ordered me angrily, "Don't go into the formation. Scream slowly, scream slowly. The doctor hasn't come yet." But I ignored her and just kept trying, and the baby slipped out. She seemed to catch it in her mouth, but she complained, "Don't worry, now is the best." But the doctor arrived after all, And soon, after the formalities were completed, when they carried me to the maternity ward, I seemed to have heard that the woman sleeping in the next bed actually shouted at me and fainted from fright. I felt very sorry, but there was nothing I could do about it. There were 8 people in my ward. When I was put on the second bed, Xian stood in front of the bed and asked me if I was in pain. I shook my head. When he was about to say more, the nurse with thick eyebrows came over and urged him to go out. Because the rules of the delivery room are from 3 to 5 p.m. No one is allowed to stay after this time. I watched him go out. I felt very sad, but I was speechless. I felt very hungry at night and still had a lot of pain. When I told the nurses, they seemed too busy to listen. And they seemed to be busy with something else. They whispered to each other and looked out the window from time to time. I was sleeping alone with unspeakable pain in my heart. When the pain was severe, I had to curl up and scratch my skin with my nails. It was about 5 o'clock in the morning when I fell asleep, but soon I heard a faint rumbling sound. It started ringing again as I got closer. The nurses were running around the room shouting in panic. I woke up and realized what was happening. There was a young pregnant woman in the next bed crying loudly, saying that something was wrong and the artillery was fired. The troops were about to come. Arriving, another person shouted that foreign flags should be hung on the rooftops to prevent planes from dropping bombs. So another woman in labor was naked and wanted to crawl under the bed to hide. My heart felt like it was lost in a dark sea of confusion, sinking forever and falling silent. Yes, Xiang can't come see me anymore, can he? When disaster strikes, the couple part ways forever. They all flew apart. So I cried and asked the nurses for some food. They gave me a bowl of porridge and 2 small dishes of soybean sprouts and pickled melons. I chewed and swallowed and felt very sad. Maybe Xian ran away alone in a panic. The house of love and shortcuts may all burn down. And Motherlin and Zhou Minghua, where are they all? I was left alone in the hospital, waiting to die. Even if I became a ghost, I would be helpless and unable to find my way home. Where is my baby? My new baby? I don't know if he is a boy or a girl. Unfortunately, he has never sucked milk once and has never been close to his mother's chest. He was only hugged away after landing, and he will never be able to see me again. No, I simply never have. I've seen his face. Thinking of this, I couldn't help shouting hysterically. I saw Xian quietly standing in front of the bed, waving his hand to stop my quarrel. He said he would take me back tomorrow, but the hospital refused. He was willing to stand on his head and give me a baby to the hospital, declaring that he was in danger. We have nothing to do with them. We are planning to flee back to In City in 3 to 5 days. And we have to take our newborn daughter with us. What? Newborn daughter? Xian has already sent a telegram to tell his family everything about moving and raising his daughter, right? I don't want to see the disappointed faces of my parents-in-law anymore. I don't want to go back to City Inn. Although the rumbling sound of cannons makes the glass pane shake, I am not afraid at all. I would rather keep my daughter and become cannon fodder here. I can't take her back and let her suffer.
Alright, this part of the story ends here.
Want to know what happened next? Let's listen to the breakdown next time.